Morning, everyone. We're just hitting 10 o'clock. We might wait one more minute. People rolling in now. All right. Well, we're up to 17. All right. We might make a start because it's just past 10 o'clock. So today we're talking about prohibited and restricted matter and some of the proposed changes under the Biosecurity Act. We'll also talk about the Biosecurity Regulation Review. So thanks everyone for coming. If you've got questions through the session, by all means, put them in the comments and we'll try to address them as we go. So we might make a start. I'd like to respectfully acknowledge Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people as the traditional custodians of the country on which we meet, and I pay my respects to the elders past, present. I extend that respect to all Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people here today. What we're going to cover today, we're going to take you through a little bit of background relevant to the Biosecurity Act. We'll talk you through some of the consultation and the feedback process. We'll also talk you through some of the proposed changes, the changes that will relate to invasive biosecurity matter relevant to plants and animals. And there is one trampant in the invasive biosecurity matter, as well as some of the changes to do with noxious fish, trampants, and marine plants and animals. And lastly, we'll cover off on the Biosecurity Regulation Review. Some of the background. So the Agriculture and Fisheries and Other Legislation Amendment Act was passed in about April 24, so last year. That Act proposed some changes to the Biosecurity Act. Some of those changes have already occurred and some of those changes are proposed to occur. So the changes will include moving the prohibited and restricted matter lists that are currently in Schedule 1 and 2 of the Biosecurity Act to the Biosecurity Regulation. Department of Primary Industries wants this change. It's a good change for us and for Queensland because it enables us to more quickly respond to changes in risk or changes in species. So a change in the biosecurity regulation can occur quicker than a change through an Act process. So it enables us to greater meet future risks. So Biosecurity Queensland has undertaken an assessment. We've looked at each listed species against the criteria in the Biosecurity Act. We've also considered other high priority Queensland invasive species, so invasive pests, pathogens and diseases for inclusion. The consultation process, there's a link on our website. Go into the Department of Primary Industries website and go into the eHub. You'll find a discussion paper there. It looks like this one here. And that really is a great document that summarises all the proposed changes. The focus of today's discussion is really around the new taxa that are being listed. We're not going to have enough time, I think, to go through all of the changes. So some of the changes that are listed in that discussion paper is things like changes to common name, changes to scientific name, some of the changes as well from prohibited matter to restricted matter, or changes from restricted matter to the GBO, or vice versa, so from restricted matter to prohibited matter, depending on how it met that Act definition. And we'll talk more about that today. But the details are, of course, in that paper, so I would encourage everyone to give it a good read. In terms of the consultation process, it's open now. We would welcome feedback through the eHub. Consultation will close 5 p.m. on the 27th of October. In terms of the process, once all that feedback comes in and we consider it, it will then progress to the Minister for Primary Industries, where he'll view all those submissions and consider it. Now, the Minister's not the one who makes the decision. It will then, he'll endorse it and progress it to Governing Council for approval. So that's looking like it would occur before the 26th of April next year. And that's because all of the implementation of a FOLA needs to occur before that date. That's probably the main things for that. All right, some of the basics now under the Biosecurity Act is prohibited and restricted matter. So prohibited matter is not currently present in Queensland, and restricted matter is present in Queensland. Prohibited matter would have a significant adverse impact on a biosecurity consideration. So human health, social amenity, the economy and the environment, they're the biosecurity considerations. Restricted matter also can have or potential to have an adverse impact on a biosecurity consideration. So all of these 4 items listed. Under restricted matter, they're also assigned categories for managing the risk. Prohibited matter, if that's detected, it's to be reported to Biosecurity Queensland on this number without delay. You also are responsible for taking reasonable steps to minimise the risk of the prohibited matter and not make the situation worse. So the restricted matter, these are the 7 categories that relate to restricted matter. So category 1, restricted matter, it must be reported to an inspector within 24 hours. Category 2, restricted matter, must be reported to an inspector or an authorised person within 24 hours. Category 3, this is a category that we use quite a lot related to plants. It must not be distributed either by sale or gift or trading, or released into the environment. Category 4 must not be moved, so that's related to the transport or the distribution of that matter. Category 5 must not be kept, so you're not keeping it, you're not housing it. Category 6 must not be fed. Category 7 is must be killed. All right, just quickly refreshing everyone's memory, land managers' responsibility under the Biosecurity Act. Land managers have a general biosecurity obligation which requires them to take all reasonable and practical steps to prevent or minimise biosecurity risks from any pests, diseases or contaminants on their property. This involves taking steps to minimise the likelihood of a biosecurity event and limit the consequences if one occurs, such as controlling invasive plants and animals. Specific responsibilities relate to prohibited matter and restricted matter, and that was what we discussed just before in those slides. Local government responsibility, very relevant to this audience. So local government's main function under the Act is to ensure biosecurity matter, defined as invasive biosecurity matter, are managed in a local government's area in compliance with the Act. Invasive biosecurity matter is a subset of prohibited and restricted matter. So it's not all prohibited matter or all restricted matter, it's a subset of them. So as it's listed under the Act at the moment, it includes plants, all the animals, and one trampant is considered invasive biosecurity matter. So local governments may also list and manage invasive species that aren't listed as prohibited or restricted matter through local laws. And I'm sure this audience is well aware of that. Local governments can also apply to the Chief Executive of DPI to have a local law species considered as invasive biosecurity matter under the Act. This enables local government to utilise powers under the Biosecurity Act for those local law species. That's a really important change, and that change happened in April last year as part of a FOLA. The other thing I'll note is local governments are required to have a biosecurity plan under Section 53 of the Biosecurity Act, and that relates to invasive biosecurity matter for their local government area. So a biosecurity plan will set priorities and measures for particular species relevant to that local government area. All right, moving along. So as I said, today we're going to talk specifically about the new taxa that are proposed as invasive biosecurity matter. So it's 13 new taxa proposed to be listed that will be the responsibility of local governments. It will not affect all councils in the same way. It really depends on the distribution of the particular species and whether it's, climatically suitable to even grow in that council area. So it will depend in what area as to whether, there will be responsibilities for local government. If the proposed changes are approved, local governments will need to update their biosecurity plans. Local governments will also need to undertake compliance in the local government area, including compliance related to public land and private land. All right, might hand over to Steve to talk through the why.
Okay, thanks, Katie, and morning, everyone. I'll just give a brief summary of these 13 new or amended species or taxa. Basically, I'll give you a bit of background first. As most of you probably aware, there are many weeds in Queensland. There's lots that could come in as well, and there's probably, there are over 200 that are in the early stages of spread. So we've maintained a list of all the what we call emerging weed threats across the state. We've been doing that for the last 30 years, and they're all subject to weed risk assessment. So we try to prioritise those species in terms of, how bad could they be. So we've done that, and since the Act came into place, that was quite some time ago, there's been demand from different local governments to list emerging weed threats, certain species. There's been taxonomic changes, and there's just been species that have come to our attention that are pretty high risk. So in terms of, what made it onto the list, there's quite a few sort of selection criteria, if you like, as to why we picked these things. Well, firstly, some of them were nominated or brought to our attention by local governments, Amazon frogbit, for example. Secondly, these are all species that are being sold right now, both in Queensland and elsewhere. So obviously, by listing as Category 3, we can block that primary invasion pathway. And it's stroke of the pen type stuff. It doesn't cost a lot. Potential cost is around compliance, etc., of course, but we can easily block the invasion pathway. So yeah, high risk. The likelihood of impact is very high because they're here. They're in the early stages of spread. In a lot of cases, the feasibility of control is high because they are small populations, and ultimately there's a big benefit to be accrued by regulation because this is the early stages of spread. So any work that's put into them is likely to generate a big benefit. Why 13? We could have listed a lot more, but we're very conscious that this list needs to be manageable because at the end of the day, both state government and local governments, this is a drag on resources, and we're like local governments, we have very finite resources in terms of compliance, etc. So it needs to be a manageable number. So I'll just run through them quickly one by one, just so you're aware what they are. So next slide, please. So first one, Amazon frogbit. I think most people are aware of this one. This was brought to our attention by Redland City Council. It's a major weed in California. It actually blocks irrigation canals. Same old story, much like water hyacinth, salvinia, water lettuce, all those other things. It is being sold right now on Facebook group and other areas, so it's an obvious candidate for regulation. It is highly localised, and we think there's, as I say, big benefits to be enjoyed by taking preemptive action. Next one, please. Bog moss, again, is another aquatic being sold as a pond plant, aquarium plant. As far as we're aware, there's only a couple of infestations in North Queensland, haven't found it elsewhere. So, it's a bit of a no-brainer trying to take it out of trade and trying to protect large areas of the state that are still free of this pest. We've done all the climate modelling. It's beautifully suited to Queensland, highly likely to have a significant impact. So now's the time to act on it. It has been blocking some sugarcane drainage ditches, which is a bit of a concern for the north. But yeah, that's another one that's being proposed. Next one, please. Now, this one is an interesting one, Brazilian Jurema. These are all weird things that no one's ever heard of, but give it time, I'm sure they will. This is one that's being sold online quite extensively. It's actually sold as a drug plant. It's got hallucinogenic properties. Don't ask me why, but people want to try this stuff. Has been detected in North Queensland. Somebody had planted it, and Barbara Waterhouse, who's a well-known quarantine botanist, actually noticed it. The thing that concerns us is we've looked at the biological ecological traits of this species, and they are virtually identical to Mimosa pigra, which is I don't know if you've ever seen it up near in the Northern Territory. It's a frightening weed. It's one of Australia's worst weeds. So this thing has got the real potential to duplicate those impacts. So not one that we want. So again, yes, very keen to try and remove this from sale. Next one, please. So cacti in the genus Ostrocylindropontia, this isn't really a new listing. This is just capturing a taxonomic change, because what happened is the plant taxonomist, the herbarium, took a number of these cacti out of Cylindropontia genus, which is listed as well, and they put it into this new Ostrocylindropontia. So we don't want to relax any restrictions on these things via taxonomic change. So we've just basically made it quite explicit that these will be captured within the Act to make sure that people aren't selling any of these Cylindropontia type cactuses, because I don't know if you've seen them out west. They're horrific when they get going. Next one, please. Coastal silver oak. This is an interesting one. It was detected by, I think it was Glenn Leaper down at Southport on the Gold Coast in one isolated spot. It's a garden ornamental yet again. That single naturalised population has since been eliminated. It's not there anymore. So again, ideal candidate for preventative restriction. It is co-dominant. We did the risk assessment. We found that it was actually a co-dominant plant in its native range in South Africa, together with bitterbush, which we know is one of our worst weeds as well. So anything that can dominate habitat in its native range is going to be disastrous when it gets into a new country and it's freed of all its natural pests and diseases. So certainly nothing we really want. And again, an ideal candidate for restricting sale. Next one, please. Glory bower. This is one of the ones, it's a well-known weed across the world. Wherever it's grown as a garden plant, it escapes. We have the advantage of being able to watch other countries' mistakes, other countries where it has been sold for a much longer period of time. So it's almost like looking into the future. You can kind of see what's going to happen in 50 years' time, because that's what's happened in Hawaii. It was introduced over 100 years ago, and over that time, it's become a pretty major weed. So we're at the pointy end of the invasion curve here. There's hardly any of it here. However, it has been sold online. So again, a bit of a no-brainer to try and track that other trade. Next one, please. This is yet another water weed, hairy water hyssop. This passes what I call the blind Freddy test, where it dominates freshwater dams and ponds. That photo there is from near Mount Tamborine. So you don't have to do a risk assessment to conclude that is high risk. I mean, just have a look at it. Again, it is traded, not a super high seller in the aquarium trade, but yeah, something we don't want and something we can easily remove from trade. Next one, please. Hyptige bengalensis is a large vine-like shrub. I describe it as a monster form of rubber vine. It's listed among the 100 world's worst weeds. I've had a look at a site up in North Queensland where National Parks was doing battle with it, and it was just horrendous. It was dominating areas and they were making a huge mess trying to get rid of it. So certainly nothing that we really want. It is in gardens, it has been sold, but very small populations. And now is the golden opportunity to jump on these things before they really get going. Because as you know, with weeds, we do have the luxury of time, because more often than not, these things do not spread explosively or quickly. They come in, they sit there for a long time, sometimes decades. I mean, prickly pear the world's worst invasive plant ever, sat in gardens for 40 years before it took off, and it really took 80 years before it really got going. So this is a common feature of all these things. We can jump on these things early. So next one, please. Ivy gourd. This is one, again, it's got a history as a major weed elsewhere. Hawaii, elsewhere, it's been there for over 100 years. So again, we've got a glimpse into the future of what it can do. In Queensland, it appears to be very isolated. There are scattered populations down the east coast. It has been sold and cultivated by permaculturists and others. I'm not quite sure why. They just like green stuff that grows quick sometimes. But again, I think it's a pretty good candidate for restricting sale. It's definitely being sold online right now. Next one, please. Kidney leaf mud plantain. This is one the local governments have expressed concern about. It's really starting to get going in southeast, but nothing major. They're all isolated small pockets. Again, it's an aquatic. It can block creeks and dams, and it is being sold. So we're pretty keen to. The problem with these are so easy to grow that people do sell them on Facebook groups. So pretty keen to try and stop that as much as we can. Next one, please. Paper mulberry, it's a bit repetitive. Again, another garden ornamental that we know is a major weed overseas in numerous countries. We've done the climate modelling, perfectly suited to Queensland. Councils and our guys are already undertaking control in North Queensland, so really good one just to try and block that primary invasion pathway so we're not reintroducing this thing into cleared areas and also protecting clean areas as well. Next one, please. Now the blackberries, the rubus, this is a really tricky one. All states and territories have agreed to ban the sale of all wands, so weeds of national significance. It's one of Australia's worst weeds, and we're no different. This has been declared or listed for a long time, since the 50s actually. Mainly a problem around Stanthorpe Warwick, so the cool climate areas. But there's been some taxonomic revision of this thing, and this is one of the ones that we're keen to keep up with the latest taxonomic advice. And I spent like a couple of months looking into the genetics of this thing, and it's horrifically complicated. And there's no easy way to define what should be listed. Basically, we're going to propose a blanket ban on the whole rubus genus, except for natives, obviously. And we're going to allow commercial sale of the fruit, because obviously fruit for human consumption poses very little risk. But the actual growing of the stuff does pose a risk, so we're keen to regulate that. I won't go into the inner workings of the genetics, but basically this is a species that defies taxonomic definition. This is just how it's evolved. It's like the grasses. It is evolved to be super variable, constantly changing and dynamic. It's got polyploidy, it's got hybridization, cross species, it's got huge phenotypic variability. This is just what it does. It's a super plastic species that can take advantage of any disturbed habitat. So trying to describe it in law is really hard because you can't nail down the species. So hence we've gone for a genus level. And we've done that for a lot of prohibited species where there is taxonomic confusion. To make compliance way easier, we just ban the whole genus and we don't really have to worry about any taxonomic argument. It just makes it much more practical. So next one, please. Sicklebush, Dichrostachys cinerea. This is one that concerns us mainly because it's such a significant weed overseas. We know it's been in Queensland for a long time, but it hasn't really done much yet. It could just be a bit of a sleeper weed. So just more of a precaution, this one, because it's such a major weed overseas, including in its native range. We're pretty keen to add it on the list. And from what I've seen, there's not, apart from one population around Townsville, the other stuff is really scattered and would be a piece of cake to take out just as a precaution. So very low drag on resources and potentially a big benefit. So you can kind of see a pattern here. These are what I call the low-hanging fruit. These are species that are pretty convincing high risk and very little drag in terms of our resources, our collective resources. Next one, please. I will hand over now to Craig because that's the end of the plants. We'll deal with the dogs. Thanks, Craig.
Thanks, Steve. Yep. Morning, everybody. Yep. So a change, a taxonomic update for dingoes and dogs. So under the previous legislation, the taxon for dingoes was Canis lupus dingo, and domestic dogs or dogs other than dingoes, like wild dogs, were Canis lupus familiaris. But now the taxonomic update's Canis familiaris. So the change there is that basically the removal of category 5 for the keeping of dingoes. So dingoes are another breed of dog under scientific science at the moment. So that's pretty much a change.
All right, thank you. We'll move along. All right, so this one's not invasive biosecurity matter, but just for everyone's knowledge, some of the changes in noxious fish space. So noxious fish are freshwater species. They're not all fish, as you can see from the photo with the freshwater gold clam, so they can include other species as well. They all have an adverse impact. So currently we have 125 noxious fish species that are listed as prohibited matter. We have 65 species under Schedule 5 of the regulation, the non-native invasive ornamental fish. The proposal is to move all 125 species up to the genus level and in a few circumstances up to the family level. Grouping at the genus or the family classification ensures invasive species that possess those similar ecological traits, climate adaptation potential, and risk of hybridisation are managed consistently. It also minimises misidentification, which is an ongoing issue in the fish space. It leads to simpler regulation and improves compliance within the aquatic trade and hobbyists. So the proposal will pull up to 86 genus or family level taxa in the prohibited matter space. The focus is very much into the prohibited matter, as in things that are not currently present in Queensland, and that is because once they're present, it's often really hard to manage the noxious fish. Once they're in, they're very hard to manage. So there's one new taxa in the prohibited matter space and one new restricted matter species. Some people may be aware of this one, the freshwater gold clam. Okay, tramp ants. There is one species of tramp ant that is invasive biosecurity matter, and that is the yellow crazy ant. There is no proposed changes to the current arrangement. So invasive ant species that spread to many parts of the world and can cause harm. The proposal is for 12 new species to be prohibited matter. Again, we don't want these species here. They're not currently here, and we definitely don't want them. They are invasive ant species and can cause significant harm. There's also one new species in the restricted matter. And the reason why it's restricted matter, we're not 100% confident in its current distribution. There have been some detections around ports, and I think there's one in iNaturalist that might not have been verified. So there's further work before we're confident that that particular ant species is not present in Queensland. So without being certain around it, it is listed as restricted matter, or proposed to be listed as restricted matter, I should say. Okay, the marine animals and plants, again, these are not invasive biosecurity matter, but just for local government's awareness. This is about the saltwater species, and again, they can cause harm. So the proposal is to add 2 new species into prohibited matter and 2 new species into the restricted matter. So the photo on the right there, it probably doesn't give it justice, but that's sitting in somebody's hand. Quite a big oyster, that one. All right, so now we're moving into the have you got feedback? Submissions can be made again before 5 p.m. the 27th of October through the eHub, where you'll find the discussion paper that has more details around the changes. If you've got any specific questions or you'd like to provide your feedback, here's an email address, or alternatively, you can post your feedback into this mail. Moving along. All right, the last part of this is just around the regulation review. So the Department of Primary Industries is reviewing the biosecurity regulation. It's a pretty standard process for any subordinate legislation. It's required under the Statutory Instruments Act to review them every 10 years. So at the moment, the biosecurity regulation will expire on the 1st of September 26. Before expiry, we must undertake a review of that regulation and ensure that it's still effective and efficient, it's fit for purpose. If you have, by all means, have a look at the biosecurity regulation. If you've got any comments about it, please feel free to email the BQ consultation email. We'd welcome feedback on that. Okay, on the horizon, just for everyone's knowledge, you know, these things are coming up, so it's good to advertise them a little bit. We do have some online training modules that will be released soon. So one is Biosecurity Basics, and then Advanced Biosecurity Management. And then the third module is Engagement, On-Ground Action and Compliance Approaches. It's particularly relevant to local government councillors, CEOs and operational staff. So the training is tiered to those three kind of sectors, if you want to call them that. You know, and they go into different levels of detail, or you know, depending on what your primary role is or where your primary sit. The other good training that's coming up is Industry Biosecurity Response Readiness, and this will be available to everyone, anyone and everyone. In terms of resources, the Backing Local Government team, part of Department of Primary Industries, are working on a SharePoint site, a resources hub. It will contain a suite of information and support material for local government, things like templates, procedures, risk assessments, a whole heap of information. So that will hopefully be out before the end of the year. Really useful information in there. And lastly, the Invasive Species Planning Toolkit. So if anyone's familiar, there was a toolkit which was great, the Wild Matters Toolkit. It's sat on LGAQ's website. We've had a look at the Wild Matters tools and provided an update to it, and gone into a lot more detail about specific areas. So that toolkit will be available on DPI's website before the end of the year. It is particularly useful for local governments in developing your biosecurity plans. So it will help local government to prioritise species for inclusion in biosecurity plans, but it's also relevant to any property owner because it can be applied to different scales. So it can be applied at the property scale or the local government scale, etc. So just wanted to alert everyone to that material coming up. I think that's our last slide. I just want to check in. Is there any questions online? Let's see.
Yep, got one there, Katie, from Darren.
Okay.
Are you going to discuss a prohibited list that are going to restricted, such as TSA, and the criteria explanation to make it restricted?
Oh, tropical soda apple.
We can discuss that. Yeah. So it doesn't meet the prohibited matter criteria as described in the Act, which is not present in Queensland. Section 20 of the Biosecurity Act has certain criteria for prohibited matter, and TSA is actually deemed to be in the state here, and there's quite a few infestations of it in Queensland that are subject to control programs and hopefully eradication. So when they meet that criteria of nearing eradication or being eradicated from Queensland, they could then transition to prohibited matter. At the moment, it doesn't fit prohibited matter criteria.
Yep, that's a good explanation. Thanks, Craig. A couple more questions. Good-o. Okay, dingoes. Can we share the dingo research underlining the proposed changes, please? Okay.
It's a scientific update that's been accepted by by all by Queensland, and that's changes now Canis familiaris. So if you want to find out more, Michael, yeah, it's we can find some more information for you, mate, and get it to you. But it's now been described as a taxonomic update to Canis familiaris.
We might be able to provide you some more some documents. So we'll come back to you, Michael, with a couple of publications to support that. So just to be clear, the change basically means that, the change to the scientific name basically means that both, a dog, whether it's a Chihuahua or a Great Dane or a Dingo, are all breeds of the same species. So, what was previously dog and dingo separate now is the same, scientific name. So that change means that we are treating it as one species, and the categories for dog were previously 3, 4, and 6, and the categories for dingo, I think, were 3, 4, 5, and 6. So the combining of them means that it's now 3, 4, and 6, removing category 5. So category 5 is the keeping, and of course, in the dog context, the keeping of a dog would mean it's a domestic dog. So it's covered by the animal. I can't think of the name. Sorry.
Animal Management Act. Animal Management Act, cats and dogs. So domestic dogs, people keeping dogs are subject to the Animal Management Act, cats and dogs, which as you would know, local government officers know about the ability to implement that act. So once it's being kept, it's then subject to the Animal Management Act, cats and dogs. So
all right, so we'll try and get some specific. We'll take that on notice, Michael, and get you some publications on that. One from Steve: are there any elected subjects which will be removed from restricted to the GBO? Yes, there are. Have a look at the discussion paper. There are species proposed to move from restricted matter to the GBO. I can't remember the names of them off the top of my head, but please reference the discussion paper. If you've got specific questions, by all means, send it to the BQ consultation email and we can clarify something specific if you need. Next one. Will both commercial and non-commercial growers of rubus species require a permit? That's a good question. Back to the rubus. So the permits are proposed only to be issued for commercial purposes. Domestic growers will not be able to have a permit. I think
that's pretty much it. So Gemmo, so there's not a criteria under the Act to provide a permit for domestic growing of rubus. There's only commercial permits. There's certain permits under the Act, and commercial permit is one. There's no domestic permit available.
That is subject to industry consultation, of course. We're dipping our toe in the water to see how hot it is, really, from a policy point of view. You might get burnt off yet. See?
Yep. I can't see too many more questions flowing in. Lakina? Yeah. Okay, a couple more. Good-o. I'm pleased there's some comments coming in. So any thoughts on listing Lakina? So look, things like new species, you're most welcome to provide feedback and make suggestions and the reason why you think that species might be particularly relevant. Does anyone want to comment on Lakina, Craig or Steve, around risk assessment?
Might leave that to Steve.
Okay. Well, yeah, we did a risk assessment a long time ago. I mean, no question it's having a significant negative impact. The problem, as you know, is it's also having a significant positive impact. It's one of our premier forage shrubs. So the problem is, it's very widespread. The question around feasibility of control is the big one for Lakina. And I guess our unofficial policy position is we believe from a state level feasibility of management is very poor. Sure, it could be done locally, like many things, but in terms of state legislation, we believe it's not the appropriate tool for the problem. The problem is pretty much too far gone. And in terms of public appetite for listing something, it would be very controversial. It would be, very difficult. It sits up there with listing buffalo grass, which is kind of in the same boat. Big negative impact, big positive impact. These are really tough. It'd be the toughest policy dilemma, I think, in terms of weed management, how you deal with these, what we call conflict species, where depending on your situation, on your values, on your views, you have a different opinion as to how these things should be managed. Obviously, the GBO still applies to all these things because they do have an impact on biosecurity considerations. So that's one thing. But the other issue is it's all about picking your battles, I think. And I'd like to pick off the low-hanging fruit, species where we can have a win and there's minimal public opposition to that win. We've only got finite resources. We could burn up a huge amount of our effort, lose what's left of our hair, taking on some of these conflict species and probably not win at the end of the day. So I think it's about picking your battles, and that's why, I've been studying this issue for 38 years. I've really come to this position where I think have a crack at the potentially invasive stuff, try to keep that stuff out, rather than trying to tackle what I call intractable problems, because they're just super resilient. They're not going away. They're here forever. Yes, we can try biocontrol on certain targets, but obviously biocontrol would be highly problematic on something like leukemia because, as a general principle, we don't try to control, commercially valuable things for obvious reasons. So really difficult. I know it's a tough one. I lie awake at night wondering what the hell we can do with some of these really widespread high impact species. I don't have any answers, I'm afraid. I don't think legislation is the right tool for the job, basically. So I can't say too much more than that.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. That was a really good summary. What I will say is local government has the option to declare a particular species as local law species. There are a couple of councils that have declared feral leukemia under local law. And then through the process, there's a bit more detail on DPI's website. You can apply to the Chief Executive of DPI to have that local law species declared as invasive biosecurity matter. And then you can still use the enforcement tools under the Biosecurity Act to do compliance or enforcement activities related to leukemia. And I can, on our website, we've actually got 2 local governments that have done that for feral leukemia already. The details are on our website. So any local government can do that as an option. You're very much right, though, Steve. We're at the state level, and you guys are very much in the know as to what's appropriate in your local government community. So that's where, local decisions about what are pests are really important. All right, moving to the next one on dingo. Would the keeping of dingoes fall more so under the Nature Conservation Act? Yes, it does fall under the Nature Conservation Act in protected area state. So do you want to elaborate that on that one, Craig?
Yeah, Darren. Yeah, it's protected on the protected estate, but when it's not on the protected estate, Nature Conservation Act does not apply, and the Biosecurity Act applies to wild animals, that unowned, non-domestic wild dogs. So that's where that. So the Nature Conservation Act, protected areas, Biosecurity Act, wild dogs outside of that area. And then if it's a domestic dog or kept as a domestic dog, it's Animal Management Act.
Yep. Summary. Any more questions? Okay, so probably if that's it, we might finish this webinar. Thanks very much for everyone's attendance today. It was really good to have some questions there. I'm pleased everyone's listening in and thinking about what are the pests relevant to their local government area. So, you know, as I previously said, if you've got feedback, we really would love to hear it. Please read the discussion paper. By all means, provide feedback through the survey on the eHub. If you've got specific questions or you want to make more, you know, if you want to understand something in more detail, by all means, email this email address, and we might be able to provide you more information to support, you know, whatever your comments might be or your feedback. And the other option is to post your feedback in. So thank you very much for attending today. I'll let you all go.
Thanks, Katie. See ya.